Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ramadan Mubarak from Qur'an Girl here, and also today is a big day. It is June 7th, 2016, and it's the day that California, Montana, New Jersey, New Mexico, South Dakota, and North Dakota go out to vote. So don't forget to go out and place your votes today for right here, sporting the shirt. Alright, now onwards to our Tajweed class. We've covered a lot of Sifaat before, the Hams, Jahar, Shidda, Rakhawa, Tawassut, Isti'ala, Istifal, all of those different ones. We've talked about the Fashi, we've talked about Isti'ala, and we've talked about Ghunna. What I'd like to cover today are a few more of the Sifaat, and there are some more that are the opposites. Ismat and Ithlaq, even though I've put it here, they're just so that you know they're opposites. However, we're not going to be covering them because I didn't cover them in my Tajweed class. The reason being the teacher said that it wasn't going to affect the phonology or Tajweed rule. So we didn't cover that. However, we did cover Itbaaq and Infitah, which I think I touched on a little bit before. She went a bit more technical this time. What she said was that the Itbaaq letters are the ones from Isti'ala letters. So if you remember, Khussa, Daghtin, Qid are the Isti'ala letters. Isti'ala meaning the letters from the back of the tongue gets elevated. And if you recall, for Khussa, Daghtin, Qid, and I'll write it here, hopefully you'll be able to see. Khussa, Daghtin, Qid. If you circle all the letters that have bigger circles in them, like Sad, Dad, see how there's like a circle trap? I consider that like, this is the little things that I use to remember, like a little air bubble trap. Because what it is Itbaaq means adhesion, and what happens in those letters, these four letters, Sad, Dad, Ta, and Tha, which are the letters of Itbaaq, what happens is the front of the tongue is also elevated. So what happens is, just like how you have like a bubble in there, you have like a bubble up against the roof of your mouth because both the back and the front of the tongue are being raised, so it traps the air in there. That's what we call adhesion. That's what we call Itbaaq. The applied definition is, let's see from the notes, the adhesion, it has to have Isti'ala, and it's where the front of the tongue is up and sound travels between the tongue and the roof of the mouth. Alright? And only Sa, Da, Ta, and Za are Itbaaq. So the rest of the letters are all Infitah. That was pretty easy, right? Now, Inhiraaf. Inhiraaf is basically something unique to the letters Lam and Ra. If you recall, Lam and Ra both come from the same Makharij al-Jawf, kind of, sort of, right? And which one is that? Is that, not Makharij al-Jawf, Makharij, sorry, because Jawf means the oral cavity, right? Which is the Alif, Waw, and Ya. So the Makharij have different, if you recall, and if you look back in the previous videos, you'll see that they come from different places, right? Do they come from the nose? Do they come from the tongue? Do they come from the oral cavity? Do they come from the throat? All of these different places that they can originate from. Well, both Lam and Ra originate from the tongue, albeit different parts of the tongue. Lam originates from the sides of the tongue, and Ra originates from the tip of the tongue. So Inhiraaf is going to explain why that is, or how that is, the technicality of how that happens to those letters. But just to backtrack a little bit, if you remember, Lam and Ra also share something else in common. See, when I say the letter Lam, Lab, or Ra, I don't need my nose. That means it has no Ghunna. But wait a minute. Aren't they letters of Yarmaloon? Aren't they letters of Idgham? What did we learn about Ra and Lam that were special about Idgham? Do you remember? They are idgham كامل. That means that they don't have any غنة, right? So they were the special ones from the Yarmalun that were idgham كامل, ra and lam. They don't have a غنة sound. Unlike yanmu, all the other letters, they have idgham. Even though idgham means merging, right? When the other letters, the yanmu letters, merge, they sound like they have still a little bit of غنة. So like shay'im muqita is from yanmu. So you can hear shay'im. See the sound difference? You can hear it. Or sultanam mubina. That's also with idgham. Versus the lam and ra, ones have no idgham sound when they merge, right? So they are idgham kamil. Examples of those are hijrullah or humazatil lumazah or ghafurur rahim. No ghunna in any of those. Those are idgham kamil. So ra and lam share idgham kamil, and ra and lam also share inhiraaf. So we said that they both come from the tongue. However, lam comes from the sides of the tongue, ra comes from the tip of the tongue. What happens in this case is that lam, basically, when the tongue hits with the sides of the teeth, automatically the sound of the lam is drifting. However, the tip of the tongue blocks it. So we're not actually making the sound with right? We're not like trying to stick the tip of our tongue up and make that sound What it's actually doing is that the sides of the teeth sides of the tongue are hitting on top, right? And what's happening is that's where the air is flowing through. So even though we have the tip of the tongue blocking on top, the air is still able to flow through the sides. That kind of air drifting off the sides is kind of like, okay, it's been trapped by the tip of the tongue, now where's it gonna go, right? That's where the sound is coming from. So that's why it's actually called Inhiraaf, because of that drifting of the sound. Now what I wanted to check for you, and that's why it's called Hafat al-Lisan, right? That lam comes from Hafat al-Lisan. And it's exactly that reason. Because when you talk about makhraj, you're talking about where does the sound come from. So that's where the sound is coming from, right? The tip of the tongue is blocking the sound and the air from going through. So it's coming from the sides of the tongue. Al. So you don't have to even go al or al. You just go al. And you feel it that yes, even though the tip of the tongue is blocking, it's coming from the side. That's called inhiraaf. So what I have written in my notes is sound and air come running, but is blocked by makhraj of lam, so drifts to the sides of teeth. All right? And that the tip of the tongue is blocking. That's what I have in my notes. But basically how I explained it to you. Now, for ra, it's the opposite, right? Ra is a makhraj from the tip of the tongue, right? And so ar is basically from the tip of the tongue. So what you have in the letter ar is that the sound comes, so the makhraj comes from the sides of the tongue that are elevated. So the sound is trapped in there and goes through the tiny opening at the edge of the tongue. That's why it's called a tip of the tongue letter, right? It's because of the fact that the air is actually coming from the tip of the tongue. Ar. So really, even though the you've got the tongue elevated and blocking the air from going through that part, it's actually going to then escape from the tip. because that part's not being blocked. You see, ar. So what I have written in my notes is that the makhraj comes from the sides of the tongue that are elevated. So the sound is trapped in there and goes through the tiny opening at the end of the tongue. So this is the meaning of inhiraaf. It has to do with the drifting of sound of letter due to the incomplete running of the sound caused by the tongue, all right? And how the air is being blocked. So both these sifat, any sifat, are differences caused by sound and air and how they're being pronounced. So the meaning of inhiraaf then is that you are drifting the sound of the sound and air is drifting in a different direction because of being blocked in a certain direction. All right, and that is the meaning of inhiraaf. Now, when I said the letter ra, you have to, in Arabic, you can, if you could hear the way that I said ra, ar, it has a very light trill to it, a very light. I don't go ar, right? There's no rolling of the tongue. There's no trilling of the tongue. So in Arabic, that trilling, the light trilling that you do for ra, for the letter ar, see? It's got just a tiny, like maybe one roll, ar. It's not ar, and it's not ar. It's ar, right? So that light trilling is called takreer. And basically, takreer is the light trilling of the tongue when pronouncing the letter ra due to its light articulation point. And you should be careful not to exaggerate that trilling. Gotta go, doorbell's ringing. Have a wonderful day, wonderful Ramadan. Please keep our family in your dua. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.